Thanks for the opportunity, and good day. I am from your host state. I am an Alaskan, and so we're going to have to spend just a couple of minutes, first of all, thanking you very, very warmly for actually coming to Alaska, to taking time out, to coming and seeing some of the great things we have to offer you. I hope you have some time to get out and about. I think you may have sensed that you're very, very close to an extremely amazing part of the world. Just a few minutes away from here are some of the wildest places on Earth. And of course, as Alaskans, we are extremely proud of the fact that we are the biggest state, that we have the biggest bears, the tallest mountains, the wildest places, and schools of wild salmon. And I really do stress wild salmon. If you want to start a fight with an Alaskan, just say, you know, I had some delicious farm salmon last night. It was really good. I can promise you, there will be a dust-up in a matter of minutes. In fact, I want to start with a photo I took just 2 days ago. You can put the first slide up, please. This is a picture I took on a flight from Fairbanks to Anchorage just 2 nights ago. The pilot of the Alaska Airlines flight was kind enough to do a flyover of Denali as we were coming south from Fairbanks. It's a 20,320-foot summit, and you know, it knocks your eyes out every chance you have a chance to see it. And I mentioned Fairbanks, let me just give you a quick plug for our friendly sister city to the north. If you have any time at the end of your stay here, try to get up to Fairbanks, because this mountain and the other mountains of the Alaska Range tend to hold these clouds, these coastal clouds in above us, like you're seeing this morning. It's kind of a little gloomy morning, a lot of clouds. Just north of the Alaska Range, all different, right? Clouds are held in by those mountains. It's much drier up there. It's warmer. It's sunnier. It's a nicer place to be in the summer. Okay, let me emphasize that, in the summer. And also, if you go to Fairbanks, you may find out that there's just a little bit of a New York-Boston kind of a relationship between the two cities. You know, we love each other, but there's a friendly competition about who's the most rugged, who's the toughest, and who's the most Alaskan. So the next view, actually, I just want to spend another minute on Denali, just because while we're doing Alaska. This is a picture of my wife and the two of us on a camping trip in a place called Kosugi Ridge, just a couple hours north of here on the road to Fairbanks on the Parks Highway. There's a campground. You can park your car, and 2 hours later, you're up on the tundra, looking across this beautiful expanse of open ground to Denali jutting up in the air. There's lakes up there. It was a beautiful weekend. We were actually able to swim in the lakes. Most of the time when you swim in a lake in Alaska, you're out as fast as you get in, right? I mean, you're sort of coming out before your feet are in. But you could actually swim in those lakes. It was really, really a nice time. And so just another opportunity that you might have. And finally, one more view, and that's the next picture is that's me standing on the summit of Denali back in 1986. That's what it looks like from the summit. The next year I was there in 87 with my dad and my wife. We all summited in 1987, and so just couldn't resist giving you a little slice of Alaskana. I got lots more pictures of salmon, bears, kayaking. No, seriously. But you may be asking yourself, what does this have to do with pensions? And I will explain it at the end of my talk. So we'll come back around to Denali and at the end of my talk. So let's begin the more formal part of my presentation. And I do like to start with a little slice of history. This is the first example we could find of a public pension in America. It described how the soldiers who fought in the Revolutionary War were treated by their government for their service. If you lost a limb, you got half a month's pay. And I just hope that the administrators of that plan took a generous and warm-hearted view of how to gauge those injuries and who to award those pensions to. Because you know, sometimes you get lost in minutia about you know, what's a limb and what's not. But I hope not. I hope it was fairly administered. The next slide is also about the more recent example we have about national pensions. And of course, that's the Social Security Act, an attempt to limit the unforeseen and unprepared for dangers in modern life, including old age, disability, poverty, unemployment, and the burdens of widows and widowers who were with and without children. So with that little background, let's go ahead and turn to Alaska. And I think we've got a slide up there that has our Constitution there. And I'm sure many of you have something similar. If you don't, this language was adopted by us, of course, in 1959 when we became a state. And it sets down you can see it's a fairly strong, unequivocal promise. In the face of that language, the promises we make to the state employees and the other public employees who sign on with us, those promises can't be broken. That's right there in our Constitution. So we're locked in. Once you make a promise like that with that strong language, there's no backing down from that. You have a moral and constitutional and legal obligation to make good on that. Now, that being said, unlike many states, we have powerful resources to make good on that promise. We, of course, are an oil-rich state. I'm sure you've been aware of that for some time. We have significant savings accounts to draw from to sustain ourselves during low times. We are aware that oil prices go up and down, oil revenues go up and down. So when times are good, we grab some of that oil revenue and we sock it away. In the year 2008, when oil prices hit $145 a barrel, the state legislature, of which I was a member, grabbed $5 billion and socked it away, the single biggest deposit into the state savings account in the history of the state. And that's money we're going to be using for the next few years as our oil production declines and oil prices stay at a moderate level. In fact, in FY13, we had about $17 billion in so-called rainy day savings accounts. Parenthetically, there's another $50 billion in the permanent fund you probably heard about. Permanent fund, of course, is a set-away fund. It's a fund whose corpus may not be touched without an affirmative vote of the people in the state. And the last time someone even suggested doing that, not in a real vote, but in an advisory vote, shall we ask you in the future if we could touch the permanent fund? That was in 1999, and the advisory vote was 80 against and 20 in favor. So you can imagine that public policy and public office holders like me tend to think twice before we suggest using the permanent fund to solve any problem besides paying dividends and sitting there nicely and growing for the future. So we do have, of course, public employee retirement systems. We call it the Public Employee Retirement System. It's called PERS. We have a teacher's retirement system called the Teacher's Retirement System. It's called TERS. PERS and TERS are the two acronyms you'll hear me using throughout the rest of the presentation to talk about. Basically, these are statewide programs. Unlike some of you who have counties at home and county retirements and county plans, we take a statewide approach. You may be a firefighter for the municipality of Anchorage, where you are right now, but that firefighter belongs to the PERS system, the Public Employee Retirement System. They're all lumped into one big system. So we don't break it down by county. We get contributions from the municipality. They make contributions, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But there's no really separate local retirement program. That tends to mean more weight and responsibility for retirement falls on the state, right? That means our contribution rates tend to be high. The state provides the lion's share of contributions to these accounts. In FY13, state contributions were 35% of salary for state employees and 53% for teachers. Okay, so just to put that into terms we can all understand, for a $50,000 employee, state employee, that means $17,500 gets deposited by the state into the retirement account to take care of the unfunded liability. Over $25,000 for teachers. So you can see our pension liability is much like the ones you're facing. It's steep and it's serious. In addition, in order to keep the burden from falling too hard on local municipalities for this firefighter or for this teacher I was just speaking about, we cap contributions at 22% of payroll for those municipal employees. And that means and 11% for teachers. So 22% for the normal municipal employee, 11% for teachers. That means all the difference gets made up by the state. So it's 10% for the first group, the 22%, to get up to 33%, and 40% for the second group to get up to 50%. So the state's really coming in strongly to make this right. What does that mean? Well, that means it adds up to a lot of money, of course. In FY13, it meant the state paid about $610 million just that year alone toward the unfunded liabilities of the retirement programs. This is in a state where our general fund spending generally is somewhere between $8 and $9, $10 billion. So it's a fairly large chunk of our general fund spending, as you can see. So we all like to talk about how we got into this mess. You guys had the same experience we did. Let me just run through that fairly quickly. We've offered a defined benefits program since day one. It evolved over time into several different tiers of levels of richness, I guess you could say. Folks who really got in early are called Tier 1 employees, If you still have the opportunity, you might want to marry one because they really have excellent benefits. I don't know if you're single, but if you're here in Alaska, if you're looking for a long-term relationship, just somewhere in there, tier 1, tier 2. You know what? I'm a tier 2, so and I'm married, so thanks. But the tier 1 folks are highly coveted for their benefits. It's really medical benefits that kick in after 20 years of service, and those are highly coveted folks. And for the time being, when we got started, we funded our pensions at 100%. As in your state's case, in our state's case, the year 2000 really marked the beginning of the bad years. In 2000, of course, the dot-com market crash occurred, and we also that same year discovered that our actuary had been chronically underestimating health and longevity future benefits. And as we got a hold of that and began to discover the magnitude of it, combined with the stock market problems, we went in short order from 100% funding to a $5 billion liability. Part of this debate led us to re-examine whether our current retirement system was sustainable. And in 2005, in an extremely bitter fight, the legislature, moved away from defined benefit plans entirely and set up a pure 401k defined contribution retirement system for all our public employees. And I can promise you it has reverberations down to today. It's still hotly debated. It's a political issue every season, and it's just one of those questions that won't go away. You know that the defined contribution means your pension is based entirely on the accrued contributions over the employee's career. Most states have not followed our lead on that. We also discovered, having realized that our actuary did such a lousy job, brought a lawsuit against them. It was something we didn't do lightly, but having examined their duties to perform and their obligations to do good work, we took action. Mike Barnhill's here. He may have some words about that later. He was with the Department of Law. I was inside the legislature. We communicated about that, and they launched that suit and eventually recovered $500 million from our actuary, which is no small amount of money. So what happened? Market recovery and higher employer contributions slowed the growth of unfunded liabilities, but did not bring our system back to health. So that brings us to this year, 2014. What do we have? We have 120,000 employees and retirees participating in the two main systems. Okay? When the 2008 recession hit, the program's unfunded liability began to soar again, the pension funds suffering an investment loss of over 20%. In FY13, the combined unfunded liability was estimated to be almost $12 billion. So we had been obviously grappling with this, trying to find a way out. We'd moved away from defined benefit. Of course, that didn't fix anything inherently because that doesn't throw more money into the unfunded liability. And we gradually became aware that we were going to have to take some fairly drastic action. And after several years of sort of back and forth amongst the different parties about what the right way to go was, this year the legislature settled on a big down payment on the unfunded liability. From that savings account I mentioned, the $17 billion savings account, we took $3 billion out and put that money, and in the process of putting that into the unfunded liability, just to try to get ahead of the curve, right? Just because we were so far behind. That vote requires a 3/4 vote in both bodies. It was unanimous. Republicans, Democrats, rural, urban, everybody came together and said, we have got to do something. We've got the money. Let's grab it now. Let's try to get ahead of the problem. This deposit brings both the principal retirement systems up to about 70% fully funded. And that's not a particularly strong number, except it's important to remember that Alaska includes health care costs in its unfunded liability calculations. If we excluded them, as many of your states do, because it frankly gives you a little bit more wiggle room, if we excluded them, our ratio would be above 80%. So it gives you actually it's an illustration of the fight that goes over healthcare costs, whether to put them in your calculation or out. We take a more conservative approach, but it gives us a lower number. So what's next? The state is still committed to level contributions of about 30% over the next 20 years. The liability will continue to place pressure on the state's operating budget, but not at escalating terms. In order for this to work, We will need to earn 8% going forward on investments. And I listened a few minutes ago to the what may be the quote of the day, right? I wrote this down as the quote of the day, that 7.5 is the new 7. I thought that was extremely interesting. And so suddenly I find ourselves outside that and maybe a little over-optimistic, which is how we got into the problem in the first place. Higher earnings over time will reduce liability, though history will hopefully teach us not to get too happy during years of high markets. Meanwhile, the defined contribution systems, the DC-only system, right, our defined contribution system is running in parallel with the defined benefit system, has its own problems. It does not seem to encourage employee retention, especially as Alaska opted out of Social Security. That means for folks like teachers, firefighters, other public employees, there's no safety net underneath that DC system. There's not Social Security waiting to catch you in case you make disastrous investment decisions with your own money. And many folks object to that. We are starting to see, as the economy in the lower 48 picks up and gathers steam after the 2008 recession, and people now have more options, we're starting to see that folks, public employees, work here for 2, 3, 4 years, take their defined contribution lump of money and go off somewhere else to enjoy a more stable retirement. We've been providing a mix of approaches to this, but so far nothing really substantive has come out. So now we're going to go to the final slide. That means we have to skip ahead for 2 or 3 slides because that slide I decided not to use. Keep going, stop. That is what we're going to have to pay out over the next few years, and you can see it caps out at about $3.5 billion for 8 years or so. That's what we'll be paying out to satisfy the obligations we made to these defined benefit retirees. Since the universe is closed, since we now no longer have a defined benefit retirement system, the universe will eventually expire and come to an end, and that's when it starts to tail off. But this is our Mount McKinley. Okay, this is where the story all comes back around. This is our Mount McKinley. This is our Denali. It's a huge summit we're going to have to get over the top of. And how do you climb Mount McKinley? One step at a time, right? And that's what we started doing with the $3 billion down payment. We took a big leap forward, but it's just going to be slow trudging, tough trudging, and you got to climb that hill. It's an absolute obligation. We're not going to back down from it, but it's a challenge to this legislature and to the legislatures of the future. And I think that brings me to the end of my prepared remarks. Thanks so much for your attention.